Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to MTGO Traders. My name is Taryn. I have with me a very special guest today, and this is, well, it was Magic Man Sam, but now it's Rhystic Studies. Sam, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Taryn. How you doing, man?
Doing great. Man, this is awesome. I got to actually, bring you on here because you're one of my favorite Magic creators on the channel, or on the platform, on YouTube, I guess. But yeah, so the first questions I always ask everyone that whenever I interview them for the channel is, how did you get into Magic?
My origin story relates to my cousin Kyle Miller. He grew up playing games of all varieties, and he was very influential. He's like 5 years older than me, and I used to spend my summers in the DC area where he lives. So we would get together basically for 1 month out of the year, and he would introduce me to a bunch of games. And one of those games was Magic, but when I returned home, I didn't have anyone to play with, right? Because Kyle lived across the... Yeah, so I was exposed to Magic in the Odyssey area, or the Odyssey era very, very early on. But then I rediscovered the game kind of at the end of my college career
Gotcha.
on kind of a whim. So that's when I actually really started playing, but I knew about the game from very early on. So
Right. So have you just always been interested in kind of card games? Was this your first card game you got into? Or were you kind of one of those kids like me where we got into Pokemon and then into Yu-Gi-Oh! And then into Magic?
Yeah, I didn't go through Yu-Gi-Oh, but I did start with Pokemon, partially because of Kyle. But Pokemon was more of I actually never really knew how to play the Pokemon game. I just collected cards because that's what everyone in elementary school did at that time.
Right, yeah.
And then played the RPG on Game Boy Color. That was my interaction with Pokemon. But I still wonder. Yesterday, somebody tweeted out that there was a live stream of Pokemon, the trading card game, going on, and I have no idea how that game works. These dudes were just shuffling their decks and playing 15 cards per turn. So
yeah.
I'm still curious about how Pokemon works. But yeah, I guess Pokemon was the introduction to the trading card game world, and then now it's Magic exclusively.
Gotcha. Yeah, I grew up in the same kind of thing where I picked up Pokemon first because of the game and then the anime when it came out and stuff like that. And I still don't know how to play.
Yeah,
I wish I did, but it's like Jess, my fiance, knows how to play and she loves it. And she's always like, we should teach you how to play sometime. I'm just but I have so much other Magic stuff to do,
Yeah,
but
right,
It's so interesting to see especially those tournament stuff when they just played out their entire deck. I'm like, how is it working? I don't understand this game.
I don't understand it at all.
Yeah. So I guess the next question is, what format was your first, and your favorite format, and why is it Commander?
And honestly, it is Commander though.
Yeah.
I actually learned Magic in college from a buddy called Kirk, who was sort of our mentor. Kirk and Dion both taught us how to play, and my buddy Spencer and I. And it was mostly through EDH and partially through Cube. So I learned how to draft and learned what cards did through Cube and sort of how to build decks on the fly. And then I just kind of discovered the giant card pool and all of the mechanics in Magic's history through EDH,
right.
Which is kind of a hell of a training grounds to kind of approach, Magic. I didn't really, it was like all guns blazing, from the start. So yeah, Commander is my favorite. I do really love drafting. If I had an option to have 8 friends consistently in my life all the time, I think Cube would actually take precedence over Commander. But Commander is the most approachable and easy format and accessible, I think, at this point. So yeah, I'm an EDH kind of kid. But that's the gist.
Right. I got you. Well, what do you say, I guess, to people who were, I guess, kind of commenting, I mean, I've even kind of made a video on this about how Brawl is being kind of more appealing sometimes than Commander.
Yeah,
Because I know the bar to entry in Commander is so high sometimes. It's oh, I'm just going to go to EDH, REC, and try to build a deck from that. But it's all those decks kind of end up being the same deck. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think there's a natural progression. I think one of the most appealing things about Commander is you sort of get introduced to the game and maybe you play Standard for a little while and then you discover all these cards that you can't play with because they're outside of, the most common format or whatever. And so your first EDH deck, my first EDH deck I built was just a bunch of cards that I really loved and I wanted to play with, but there wasn't much synergy between them. And, and that's kind of what the first version of EDH looks like. And then you go to this, then you kind of understand the format and then you build the deck that has all the staples in it. You're like, oh, this card is very good in this format, so I'm going to play with it for a while. But at least for me, I got bored of that also, So the next step after that is you sort of be a contrarian. You're like, let's build a deck that has none of these cards because I'm sick of
Right.
seeing them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like the level of accessibility kind of goes like that. It's like gigantically unaccessible. It seems that way, but
Right.
I would always encourage people to kind of skip that step of playing with all the cards you think you need, because the format still does allow you to play with cards that are really, really janky and
Right.
and can still show off and have fun. And sometimes you end up winning because you're perceived as not a threat. That's
Right.
kind of like the best part of the format. So
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. The best to me is whenever if I go to an LGS and we're playing like a big commander match and there's a bunch of people within it, it's like with the player who has the competitive commander deck, that's the one we kill first, because we don't want them going into infinite combo mode. And then we know whoever has the least effective deck is usually the one who wins or is second best.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the difficulty with accessibility to Commander is not actually having a deck, especially because the precons are really good now. Mm-hmm. Like, you can buy a precon. The difficulty with Commander in terms of accessibility is just having the patience to like endure a bunch of learning, like a very, very high learning curve and exposure to cards. Like if you know 200 cards in Magic's history and you just want to play EDH, you sit down to the table and everyone's doing a bunch of stuff that you don't understand. Yeah. Can be super exhausting. So you kind of have to that's the accessibility part that's hard,
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So I kind of want to move on from Commander or the formats really quickly and talk about art, because a lot of your videos and on your channel focus on art, and your understanding of art. It's important to the Magic medium, and just how it kind of affects the community as a whole. And I guess my question is, have you always been kind of an avid lover of art, or the Magic art in particular?
Yeah, I grew up drawing. That was like my first passion, like first and second grade. I just wanted to draw all the time.
Yeah.
And like I was saying earlier, Kyle exposed me to the game, and I just collected cards because I appreciated, I think a lot of people are introduced to Magic that way. They just love the art and then they learn the mechanics.
Right.
And that was definitely where I started. So yeah, I really appreciate art. That's still kind of and now that I get deeper into how artists make illustrations for Magic, and
right.
just going deep and interviewing artists and thinking about the process more than the product, it's actually very, very intriguing as an industry. And so, yeah, my focus has shifted just from like admiring art to understanding and evaluating how it's made and the effects of that within the industry,
Right.
I don't know. That's kind of a weird abstract answer.
No, you're fine. That's totally fine. That's what I'm looking for, basically. A nice generic abstract answer to a question.
There you go. That's right. Yeah. But art's definitely my passion, and I don't think that there's anybody that plays Magic that doesn't appreciate art at least a little bit, that has some sort of attraction or appreciation for the arts, even if you're the spikiest of spikes. And it's a mnemonic device. Like, the game is it suffers without art. Like, I don't know if it's playable without art, just because that lends to, shorthanded, being able to know what cards are at a quick glance.
Right. And there are several Spike players who play cards only just because of the art. And even if they know it's bad, stuff like that. So
yeah, and that's my niche right there,
I got you. So people most know you for your really expertly crafted video essays. What kind of got you into doing video or video essays in general?
I think I went through the progression of all creators, especially in the Magic community or even in YouTube in general. Is like I want to participate in the medium. Like, I feel the drive to create something. I want to put my voice out there. I'm stoked about this, and I feel motivated. And so, like, the earlier videos for the first couple of years were very much me discovering just kind of what I wanted to do. Right. And then I took a big break and kind of accidentally fell into the sort of like video essay format, just because I came back to grad school and I thought, like, what if I just do what I do for graduate school, which is a bunch of research and then produce an essay at the end of like a semester for a term, term paper at the end of a semester. What if I could translate that exact same workflow into my hobby, and then turn that into something that is like also sort of like artistically inclined. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of how the formats came about a few years ago, and now it's a huge especially within like film studies and cultural studies on YouTube. Everybody has a video essay page now, so it's a really popular medium. But it works for me because because I really enjoy writing. So basically, it's that's why I like that format the best, is because I can produce a really, refined, crafted script, and then because of that, I kind of got good at video editing along the way.
Right,
It's been years in the making, but you slowly get better as long as you keep searching tutorials and thinking about the medium and pushing your own boundaries if you can. So
Right.
so that's how I've and like I was saying before the show, like I don't miss the days of having to set up an actual camera, and have to deal with lights and
Right.
stuff like that is exhausting. So there are small benefits to just going, off camera.
Yeah, exactly. I 100% agree with that. But again, when you're going off camera, you're having to, I guess, lean more on the editing for kind of explaining what you're saying, stuff like that.
Yeah. And that's like the flourish, the editing part
Right.
is the flourish. My goal is to hopefully have it to where, like, even without all the fancy editing, it should be able to stand as like a useful piece of, I don't know, information, if you want to
Sure.
call it that. So it's fun to edit, but like I don't want the content just to be fully reliant on it being beautiful. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. So your videos on pieces are, like your bodywork in particular, kind of focus some of them on like important artists in the MTG community, like is it Vincent? Is it Prost? Is that how you pronounce his last name?
Yep.
Prost? Okay.
Vincent Prost. Yep.
Therese Nielsen, Seb McKinnon is your most recent video.
Yep.
They're always super fascinating and like just interesting to watch and listen to. What is, I guess, your process of that? Do you have to reach out to the artist like for interviews, things like that, or for permission, or what is that?
Yeah. Luckily, since I've had kind of I have kind of a portfolio built up. Some of the artists already know me before I come to them. Like with Seb, he was familiar with my work, and like Steven Belladin had seen a couple of my videos before, so that really helps. It's way harder to just like approach an artist out of nowhere without anything to show them,
Yeah.
So like the first few videos were kind of on a whim, and then I got to a point where I realized I should probably ask permission first, like, hey, can I make a video featuring your work? And everyone's always excited because like there's two sides to it. Like one, it's flattering and it's very like complimentary. Usually like I'm not making a hit piece, right? I'm not like
Right.
the magic art of Vincent Prost and this is all the things he's done that sucks,
Right, yeah.
It's and so it's an exhibition, so it works in favor of artists, and almost on like a business side, it's something that artists can show to potential clients as just a shorthand like summary of their work, potentially, if they want it that way. It brings more exposure to artists because now I have enough of a following that, like, for example, the Seb McKinnon video, you should look through all the comments that say like, wow, I didn't know that Seb McKinnon was my favorite artist until now, because a lot of folks have appreciated his work since the beginning, but they didn't tie it together and didn't like realize it was Seb. So it's fun to tell someone's story. And I mean, really, that's like the goal of the artist series is, one, to like get players a little bit more literate with art, and it's always fun when someone can watch my video and then from then on, they're able to recognize an artist's style and quote unquote read art a little bit better. Like that's the goal, right? To teach how to approach painting and some tools to analyze, I suppose, a piece of magic art. But it's also like to tell people stories, like that's how we become bigger fans of anything we participate in.
Right.
I'm very interested. Like, for example, I'm very interested in the running community, and every time I get more biographical information on a runner, and like more information on why they run, races they've won, and you just generally get to know the person, then you appreciate the sport more, right?
Absolutely.
As long as it's the same with pros. Like once we learn a new pro and we get to see why they play Magic or whatever.
Oh yeah.
You just have a bigger appreciation for the medium. So that's the same with artists. Like the goal was just to like, you pick up a Magic card and you see a name in the bottom left-hand corner, but you really don't know anything more than that, Yeah, and
exactly.
So it's definitely about personalizing and realizing that people make the art, like this is.
Oh, for sure.
It's not just there. So
right. One video that kind of got me hooked on your content. This is a video you made a while ago. I think it was on Wayne Reynolds. The video like that. Like it's funny because whenever you put his art back to back to back within like particular different sets. Same thing with like Therese Nielsen or whoever. It's like they maintain their style throughout even the direction of the particular set they're within, and it's you don't notice that until you actually start looking at it side by side. And I think that's just like part of the genius of the art direction in Magic, as well as just like the level of talent that is within the pool of artists.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And that's the other thing is, like, I also want to draw attention to the fact that these guys are very, very good. These guys and gals, I should say, are very, very good, you know?
Right. Oh, man. So another question I guess I want to bring up from this is, you love your flavor art direction, and the Magic story has been the reason many of us, come to your channel. And a question I want to get out to other people that may not know what this is, but the word Vorthos, what does that mean to some people?
Vorthos, I recommend reading Ant Tessator. He writes names and flavor text for Wizards of the Coast. I interviewed him for my Ranker video. He wrote an article a few years ago that probably should be updated and kind of reskins, but it was trying to define like the 6 faces of Vorthos, because Vorthos just encompasses everything essentially that's, well, maybe not even necessarily that is exempt from the mechanics. Like, you can be a mechanics Vorthos, for example, or you can be like I would qualify cosplaying as Vorthos. That's part of his kind of qualifications. There's some folks that really, really care about names and flavor text almost exclusively. Like, that's what they look at first when they look at new Magic sets, or folks that care about the art. So an umbrella term for people that care about aesthetics and sort of tiny moving parts and the way they interact within the context of a game, like a game system. But yeah, it's easily defined. Like, they're not exempt from the other psychographic profiles at all. Like, I think it's very complementary. You can be a Vorthos, like a Spike Vorthos, even though they seem to be very opposite. But I would qualify Reed Duke as a Spike Vorthos. If you notice, every time he plays, he has his like beta lands that are signed by artists. Rob Alexander's always in his deck, and so he does care about the aesthetics of the game, and any other pro that chooses to use, for example, like one specific land rather than just picking up random lands.
Mismatched lands, are you crazy?
Yeah, like, I think there's a lot to be said about the crossovers between, they're not exempt communities at all. So so as long as you care about aesthetics in some shape or form within Magic, which I think all Magic players do to some extent, then part of you is a quote-unquote Vorthos. And I was hoping to I think everyone was hoping to see that realm explored in Unstable, because they've now covered all 3, main psychographic profiles, so we're hoping we get a Vorthos card within the next 5 years too. So
that would be awesome. I mean, Unstable was really popular, so I hope to see a new set come out for that too. That'd be great.
Yeah.
So another, I guess there's like this is the second to last question, and we kind of talked about it before the video started, but another point of contention in the MTG community as of late that I do want to talk about is has Magic been, I guess the art in general, has it been on a downturn the last few years, or has the viewing public simply just associated artistic intent and direction with like homogenization and the quote generic design, like the sameness of art?
Yeah. So that's another goal of the artist series, is to again make people more literate about art and realize that that you can paint the same character from 5 different artists and they will be stylistically very different. Absolutely. But also atmospherically very different, or even just the color palettes can be very different. So I think homogenization is good within the context of a set, because it is a whole. It's like a whole. The product is a whole. You want Amonkhet to look similar across all the cards, so that aids world building. It's also a question of brand. Like, if you think of Disney animated movies, like from the 30s to the 90s or whatever, not before Pixar. If you think of the old style Disney animated films, they all have a certain aesthetic about them that tie them all together. They are all visually very similar. Right. And so I think Magic is very intentional about making sure that their brands, the image of their brand is consistent. You kind of have to really, really step back. It's both, like, you have to go super micro and macro to be able to like differentiate between cards within a set. Sure. And then, but also realize that, like, just like with anything else, like fashion, for example, we're on a trend of a different form and skin of fantasy than it was 10 years ago. Absolutely. And I think when folks think about Magic and high fantasy, if you just browse like 8th edition, for example, like holistically, if you just like search 8th edition into Gather or Scryfall or whatever, and you scroll through all the cards, you're going to notice that even within 8th edition, there was a quote-unquote homogenization. Like 8th edition looks like a full set across all the cards. Individually, the cards could be very different. But even then, like that version of high fantasy has changed and evolved too. And I think Magic wants to carve out a niche within, the high fantasy genre as like Magic's version of high fantasy. The same way like Disney is one form of animation versus like Miyazaki is one form of animation. So like I think if you are upset with Magic's art direction now, it's probably because you potentially prefer the older version of high fantasy that isn't as prevalent, you know?
Exactly.
Like if you look at the card Dragon Mage, I think the card Dragon Mage is like almost one of the epitomal examples of what old high fantasy looks like, the Tolkien-esque, like spell book high fantasy. And it's safe to say that Magic doesn't have as much as that anymore because it just looks and feels different. But I don't think it's a fair criticism to say that it's like a fault of art directors, because art directors are intentional about,
absolutely
maintaining brand identity and world building, and and it's not, and it's also like the thing that I get frustrated about too is that it's not a lack of talent by any means. There are quite a few talented artists working on Magic. The majority of them obviously are, because it is the coup de grace of fantasy illustration right now. Like, if you are a fantasy illustrator, you want to be working for Magic. You don't want to be working for any other TCG or any other game company, because it's the pinnacle, So yeah, it's not a question of skill. It's a question of just like I said, fashion trends. We are dressing differently than we did 30 years ago, and that's because you want to keep evolving the format or the medium.
Sure.
So
I do think there are several people who come into Magic expecting it to kind of be this like Dungeons and Dragons ripoff, or something that's like, that kind of keeps the same stylistic flavor of Dungeons and Dragons from like the 90s, and just kind of keeps that style from like alpha to now. And it's just, you just can't do that because of the way art just kind of evolves, like, I would say authentically, or trying to think of the
organically.
word. Organically, there we go. Couldn't think of the word there for a second, missing a word. But yeah, the way just art kind of evolves organically, I don't think you can really put it in a box like that. And going from year to year, it's like they always want to push themselves and make the sets, more, I guess, it's like not so much similar, but distinct within their own sets, but still kind of retain the kind of approach from each one. Like a good artist I'm thinking of off the top of my head that does a really good job at this, because it's like he's like base level, like he's in like almost every set, like see Ryan Alexander Lee, like he does a bunch of stuff like within Khans, Dragons, and now Arnket, and going on to Dominaria. But it's like all of his stuff within the confines of a single set looks so much that set, and then you move on to the next set and it's like, okay, we're back to this now, like this style. So it's just that I feel like a lot of people don't look at it in the particular boxes like we should. We all look at it as like this big fluid, like it's still Magic and it's still coming out, and it should still look like originally Magic, So I don't think that people really consider that.
Yeah, and you kind of consider, just because Magic's been around 25 years at this point, it's a question of just generational like turnover. The artists that were making art in the 90s have also grown up and grown out of the game. Just like fundamentally, it's hard for the same people to be working on something for 25 years. You know what I mean? So there are a few that have been around for a very long time. Like Kev Walker, for example, has been in almost every Magic set. The dude has like almost 300 Magic cards. So, like there are a few veterans of the game, but now you have these young bucks like Seb McKinnon that are showing up and like kicking ass and making really good art. And that's just the nature of any beast, Like
absolutely.
It's like comparing old rock and roll, and then you get to like the prog rock of and like grunge rock in the 90s, and it's just a different flavor, of something that you love.
Trying to compare those things is I couldn't. I would just say they're different types of music completely, almost.
Yeah, you see,
So last question here. Didn't want to keep you for too long, but this is going to be kind of a short, like I told Kinji in the last interview I did, because I interviewed Kinji Nimatanami, and I was like, give me like your I guess graduation speech kind of thing, like for people who wanted to go into YouTube, like what is like the advice you would give for people getting into the medium?
I always recommend this video I watched like 6 years ago, maybe at least now. I think it was 2012. Yeah, 2012 or 2011. It's by a vlogger called Mike Falzone, and it's called "Stop Begging to Be Liked on the Internet."
I love Mike Falzone. Sorry,
yeah, man. So that video is like fundamental. He's able to summarize in 3 or 4 minutes, in a comedic and kind of boisterous way, what you must do if you want to be successful. And I've always tried, and for some reason, I just keep coming back to those things. Like, fundamentally, concentrate. What I would say, like, graduation speech style is like, just concentrate on the craft. Like a big problem I see quite often, and it's a natural thing. Like, oh, I'm gonna be a YouTuber, and before making anything, you already have your Twitter set up and your email set up and your YouTube set up, and you've paid like an illustrator to make a brand for you, and you have a fun name, and you're trying to get people to follow you, and like
right.
all those things are just the superficial levels that come later. It takes time for the brand to like show itself to you. As long as you have something to present in terms of the content, that's what matters most. So I would say like put 90% of your effort into making something that's so good that people just share it because they want to share it.
Yep.
It's kind of, you want exposure, and you have to use these platforms for exposure. You have to be on Twitter, but it's like, and you have to be accessible, like, by all means, make sure you're set up in those realms, but like that should not be the focus of your energies. The focus should be and asking for people to share, asking for somebody to share something versus them sharing it is two wildly different things, and one is way more complementary than the other, and one goes way further than the other. When I share something, it's because I organically believe it is awesome and people should see it, just like anyone else, versus if somebody asks me to retweet something, that feels bad, so just concentrate on the contents. Like, I encourage people to do it and not expect, just like in any other art form, like, don't expect an audience right away.
Absolutely.
It's going to take time for you to even figure out what you want to do, but you can't do it without doing it. So, I always recommend that. I know that's kind of a macro approach to it, but
that's a good answer.
I would watch Mike Falzone's video too, because it's silly, but there's a lot of gems in there, man.
Also, just watch all of Mike Falzone because he's a funny guy.
Yeah, he's silly. He's a good time.
He's good fun. He's a good guy. Oh, well, thank you so much for coming out for this video. I really appreciate it. We're filming this on a Sunday, so I do appreciate you taking your Sunday out and for this quick little video. But I guess that's going to do it for us. Where can people find you at?
Yeah, I'm at Rhystic Studies on Twitter and on YouTube. Those are my two platforms. Just get at me on Twitter. That's the best place to find me. And I appreciate it, man. It's been fun, and just do it. That's the last message, just do it.
Everyone should just go on Twitter and just yell at him and tell him how terrible digital art is.
There it is.
Painted art,
That's right. That's right. The worst.
That's going to do it for today. I'll see you guys later. Thank you so much.
You got it, man. Cheers.